You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is
Morning Somewhere!
for July 15th, 2024. My name is Bernie Burns, sitting right over there. I'm looking right at her, flying under the radar. Ashley Burns, how you doing, Ash?
Yeah, not too bad. Just coming off a weekend that I thought was
Just
going to be...
coming off the weekend.
That I thought was going to be relaxing, and it was not.
God, it was crazy. It was crazy before it was crazy. It was crazy. And that's part of what we want to talk about today. It's pretty wild when these big global historical events happen, or in this case, I guess a almost global historical event.
I mean, I even think the attempt is a historic action, so I think it's still historic.
But it is, and I used to get kind of obsessed with this kind of stuff. It's crazy when something almost happens, you know, and you just think like how close we all were to living in a completely different world, you know?
Yes.
Also like that too.
But for an inch, right?
Yeah, you can go the other way too. When something bad happens, you're like, if I just, you know, I got in a car accident one time when I was very young, and that was fine. But I kept thinking if I was just like went this way instead of that way, or if I'd have eaten breakfast, you know, if anything would have happened, I just wouldn't have been in that place at that point in time.
Right. Like if I'd gotten my shoes on faster, I wouldn't have been in this spot at this moment in time.
And in this particular case, we're of course talking about the assassination attempt of former president and current presidential candidate Donald Trump, where, you know, from what I've seen from the footage, he just essentially did one of his mannerisms where he turned his head and just happened to not get shot in the head.
It does seem that way. And there's a lot of information.
See the photo of the bullet like going by?
I did. And there's so much coming out at such a rapid pace just at the moment that I'm sort of waiting to absorb it all, if that makes sense, because there's so much and I don't know yet how much is sort of people putting together theories and how much of it is factual reporting. So I'm sort of waiting to see what the final story ends up being, because there is so much coming out so quickly. I almost can't absorb it all and make sense of it all.
Right. And the only guarantee I think in this whole thing is if you say anything, the earlier you say something, the almost surety that you're going to be wrong eventually in something that you say. And the other thing too is like everything's being dissected over and over and over again. I don't know if there's anything that we can possibly add to this conversation other than express, I don't know about you, Ash, but my own personal just numbness now to this. At first, this outrage, and now just this intensely empty, numb feeling I have of just where I know how we got here. You know, I watched us go down this path to get to this point, but I just hope, as weird as this sounds, that this is the destination and this just isn't another stop along the way. You know? Yeah,
I mean, we can certainly hope so, but it does feel like there's a sense of like this inevitable sliding down the slope. And I don't think this is going to make the political contentions in the U.S. much better.
No, it's crazy. It makes me think about, too, people who were in the 60s, like everything that was going on with civil rights in the 60s, the Vietnam War, and then this kind of thing happened every year or couple years in the 60s. And it's just like, how did we get out of that? I was before my time, before probably anybody's time listening to this. And it's just like, how did we come through that era? You know what I mean? It's just, it's hard to believe this, but it kind of makes everything we've been going through in the past few years is like it pales in comparison to stuff they were dealing with back then. You know?
Yeah, it does help to put it in a little bit of historical context, I guess, because they did get through it, and hopefully we will also get through this. But
two things, though, real quick. I want to say the ad, which is just two things I found, which I found interesting. We'll link them in the link dump. One was there was an aerial photo of the site, which was, once I could see it from afar, it was vastly different than I had imagined it from all the up-close shaky cam footage of the different parts that I had seen online. We'll link that aerial photo of it. And then the other thing was, too, this was actually came from a conspiracy subreddit, which then started making small headlines. The attempted assassin, Thomas Crooks, was in a BlackRock commercial a few years ago, and that was scrubbed from the web. and then was since they had to come out and say, yes, he was in it, but he was in the background and not really part of it or anything. But people went kind of wild with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very strange. Very strange. But, and one of the other things about this too is it almost feels like a black hole sucking everything in for the US, right? Like, and as Americans, we're very sensitive to it. But one thing I found interesting is that it's not the only thing that happened this week. And outside the US, the Euros happened as well. So this is a football match, a soccer match. It was the Euro finals. It was England versus Spain. And like when you go down to the pub, there was no one asking about this Trump thing. It had happened the day before. So the Euros took place yesterday, and no one at the pub had any questions about Trump.
Do you find that living somewhere else as an American versus traveling as an American is a different experience, the way people talk to you about politics?
Kind of, yes, because I feel like because now they know us a bit more and because they feel like we're here, they ask us about U.S. stuff less.
I feel like everybody asked us about specifically Trump. They asked me about Trump once, and that was it. So when you're traveling, it feels like everyone wants to talk to you about Trump all the time. I felt that way about Bush and about Obama when I would travel, and those were vastly different experiences for me. But now living here, I feel like people just kind of just want to ask you about it one time and then never comes up ever again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so we don't get it as much these days, but just I didn't see, I haven't really seen anyone really talking about it. The fervor here was very much football focused.
Yeah.
And congratulations, by the way, to Spain for winning the Euros. There are a lot of British people very sad about it.
I was happy to see actually in our local pub, it wasn't all anti-England. There were people there cheering for England.
And we have made a lot of jokes about it. There's a lot of jokes going around that basically everyone who's not England is cheering against England in this match.
Yeah.
And
not just Scotland, by the way.
No, not just Scotland, like everyone, like all of Europe. You know what? It was basically Eurovision all over again.
Is that an offshoot from Brexit, you think?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I think that this sort of anti-British like Eurovision sentiment has existed for a very, very long time. That's like a joke that no one ever votes for England in Eurovision.
Really?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like it's a very sort of anti-England sentiment. I read somewhere that on average, somewhere in the world celebrates independence from England like every 6 days. I'll see if I can find that and put it in the linked up, because I just thought that's quite a lot. And so that's quite a lot of places celebrating not being related to England anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to gradually build up probably a little bit of an anti-English sentiment.
I also, in this particular case, I can't help but think that the slogan, "It's coming home," is going to work against you.
I mean, that's used ironically, right? I mean, I know that.
No, I think it's contextual. I think what the people in England are saying it. So they're saying, no, we just mean the trophy will come to our home, as opposed to the trophy is going to where it's belongs,
to its home,
which is how it feels to everyone else on the planet when they hear that.
Sure.
Like it's meant to be here, and finally it's in its right location. That's how it feels. And it just sets up the English team and the English fans for disaster, because if they win, no one's happy for you. And if it doesn't, they're like, oh, wait, I thought I was going home this year or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe just back off of that. Is it necessary to have that?
Well, how about a new slogan? Maybe we'll get it this time.
I actually don't know that much about the sport. I have to say, Ashley, I'm doing my fucking best. I'm really doing my best. But even watching the championship yesterday, the finals match, I was just like, it was all the way through the first half and it was 0-0. And I was just like, God, my God, it's just brutal. It's brutal, And it was to the point where, and I hate to say this because I wasn't really rooting for anybody. There was a chance when England came so close to tying it up 2-2. They came so close. It was really like, you wait a long time, you get these moments where it's like, oh my God. There was immediately afterwards where I was like, oh, that's too bad. At least I won't have to watch 30 more minutes of football. You know what I mean? I shouldn't feel that way. Speaking of which, by the way, while we're talking about football, other forms of football, today, the early release of NCAA football. I think they're calling it college football now. EA Sports. It's been on like a 10, 12-year hiatus where they haven't had a college football game by EA Sports, and now they've got one today.
Today, it's coming home?
Stop it. How dare you? I'm excited. And listen, I have jackassery like this in my sports world too. We call ourselves in the University of Texas, we call ourselves the University of Texas. That "the" is a major sticking point for a lot of other schools that have a university in Texas. And sometimes that "the" gets punched a little bit more.
Sure. I can imagine so.
I get it. And I guess English fans, when I'm lecturing them about their slogan, they probably don't give a shit. Like, suck it up, bitch. World Cup's up next. We'll see how America does in the World Cup. Man, can you imagine if the U.S. made it to the finals of the next World Cup? That would be insane.
That would be insane. Let's do it. It's coming home.
Yeah.
No, but there's so there was something else that happened as well that I thought was going to be the big news that we would talk about today, and then of course Saturday happened and immediately fell off. So on Friday, Bernie, the Alec Baldwin thing happened.
Well, I do want to say too, before we talk about this, like everybody died this weekend, and that's going to get forgotten too. Dr. Ruth Westheimer died. Richard Simmons died. Shelley Duvall died, like right before the weekend.
Shannon Doherty died.
Shannon Doherty died at 53, star of 90210. This is like,
you know her from 90210. I know her from Charmed.
Oh, do you really?
I do.
Charmed?
Yeah.
And not 90210.
No, well, remember, didn't have TV when 90210 was airing. To be fair, I didn't when Charmed was airing either. I watched that in like the mid-teens on the treadmill, and that's what I know her from primarily. But it's still my association.
Mid-teens?
Yeah, like you and I were dating when I watched Charmed on the treadmill, and that's how I know.
Mid-2000s.
Mid-2000s.
Sorry, I was thinking your mid-teens, you were on a treadmill the whole time. Like, do you want to talk about this? What's going on?
The whole time.
Yeah. But so it was crazy that all of those things happened. Richard Simmons in particular is compelling to me because he was such a unique individual. They were all amazing people. Shelley Duvall was an incredible
legendary
actress. Like her playing Olive Oyl might be, there was no one else in history who could play that part.
No, like the single most accurate comic to screen translation of a character, and it was just her.
Another interesting thing about Richard Simmons is that he was kind of in this public back and forth with
hold on, the guy from Biodome.
Yeah.
The guy from Biodome. Yes, because
Pauly Shore.
Pauly Shore, thank you very much. Because they're making like a biopic about him, and they're having Pauly Shore play Richard Simmons.
Pauly Shore is trying to make the biopic because even in Pauly Shore's words, I think was like, this is the only person I can play because I look just like you know what I mean?
And as I recall, Richard Simmons was like, I do not give you my blessing for this in any way. And Pauly Shore was like, well, we're doing it anyway.
Was he saying that? I think he was publicly appealing to him. But
was he?
Now I'm curious if he would move forward with it now that the last thing that Richard Simmons said about it publicly was that he didn't want Pauly Shore to play him in a biopic. I think the stuff I read about Richard Simmons was he was trying to get it going himself. But
I see.
There was also really crazy stuff about Richard Simmons, where at one point he had to come out of hiding essentially and say that he wasn't being abused by his staff. There was this conspiracy that they were hiding him and that it was elder abuse essentially. And
Weird.
He had to come out. So he had kind of a wild end to a very wild life for Richard Simmons. But his appearances on David Letterman are some of my favorite moments on television.
So speaking of David Letterman, Letterman had a thing that I feel like very much mimics this Alec Baldwin thing, which we keep not talking about.
Let's talk about the Alec Baldwin thing real quick, and then we come back to that.
So Alec Baldwin he went on trial last week for the Rust shooting. We've talked about it a little bit because he was the actor who pulled the trigger, which killed the cinematographer. And
allegedly pulled the trigger. That's actually one of the things they're disputing in the trial.
Allegedly pulled the trigger. And previously, the armorer who was responsible for the on-set firearms was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. So now Alec Baldwin has been on trial. And Friday...
We talked about this very briefly last week, that the trial was just starting.
It was just starting. And on Friday, the judge threw the case out with prejudice, which means that it can't be brought again because the prosecution withheld evidence. And I thought this was going to be like the big news. Until, the other
I think
happened.
people, with everything that happened with the attempted assassination this weekend, I think people months from now will say, whatever happened with the Alec Baldwin thing? Is he ever going to face charges?
Start?
Yeah, for this thing that he was involved with. And he did face charges, and the whole thing was thrown out. Thrown out in such a way that now there's conjecture that the armorer, who already had a conviction, could now have a mistrial or an appeal that have that conviction vacated, essentially.
Right, because the reason the case was thrown out was for the prosecution withholding evidence, and that could end up being sort of a crack in the armor there for the armorer to just say that
puns.
It was fully accidental. I apologize. But for the armorer to say that my trial was mishandled as well, and I deserve a retrial. And then in light of that, to potentially have her sentence overturned or altered in some way. So
she was, Hannah Gutierrez Reed was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 18 months in prison in March for the fatal shooting of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, who was killed by a live round fired from a prop gun that Baldwin held on the set of the Western film in 2021. She is currently appealing her conviction, and it looks like this would definitely help her appeal.
Probably,
Yeah.
yes. So we'll see what happens with that in the long term. But I don't think this is going to help the prosecution to keep that sentence in place.
Yeah, and with the fact that it was dismissed with prejudice means it's almost like an innocent verdict where it just can't be tried again. That's it. It's done.
Right. It's done.
It's done. It's over now.
But then now that's going to be completely
But who's going to
overshadowed.
remember it now? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Which brings us back to the David Letterman thing.
Right.
Because I know you and I have discussed this before, is there was a thing, and I'm fuzzy on the details, so correct me if I get anything wrong, but there was a thing with David Letterman, right, where he had a scandal come out where he had been having an affair with some staffers, I think, and then someone tried to blackmail him.
It was a full-on extortion attempt where somebody associated with the woman, he wrote a script that essentially was all the details and it was clear who it was supposed to be about, and then offered to sell it to Letterman for $2 million. The feds got involved. There was a whole sting operation. There was a fake check. When the guy went to cash it, they grabbed him, and he was convicted of extortion. And then Letterman had to go, or not had to go, but went on television and as part of his show, gave this big, long monologue where he explained about everything and working with the feds and thanked them and everything. And it was this really crazy story that everybody was talking about.
Right, and that's huge news right up until
Tiger Woods crashed his car, and then all of a sudden, all this stuff about his texts came out and everything. And the Tiger Woods thing was just, I guess, wilder than the Letterman thing somehow.
And then you just never heard about the Letterman thing again.
No, people never talked about it ever again. What I think about is like big events, and it's a much bigger event in the world, that just erase things that everyone seemed to care about more than anything else. There was this congressman named Gary Condit, and in May of 2001, an aide that worked for him named Chandra Levy disappeared. And Ashley, it was every single headline for an entire summer about Gary Condit and Chandra Levy.
I didn't pay any attention really to politics at that point in my life, and I knew about this because you could not get away from it.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. And it was the lead headline of every newspaper, every article, cover of every magazine, right up until September 10th, 2001. And the 9/11 happened, and you never heard about it again. And I looked it up. Gary Condit was in office all the way through 2003 and ended up later on suing everybody involved with it. Like writer, not everybody, but like he sued one writer in particular. Somebody else was convicted of the crime later. Now then that was overturned. So now Chandra Levy's death her remains were found later. Her death is still listed as unresolved, but it was insane how this was such, at the moment, an important, crucial part of American society and media, and then just didn't matter the next day. Didn't matter at all. And those things don't happen. I'm not going to compare 9/11 to what happened this weekend, but it's weird how those things will just completely overshadow and erase everything around them.
Yeah, it's almost like a black hole of attention because we only have so much to give as people.
We do, and also it feels like the way people are reporting on this assassination attempt too. It's like when the event happens, it like creates this giant void or hole like you're talking about, and then people are just constantly trying to fill it with information. And everything just gets over dissected or repeated 1,000 times. So I don't think we have anything new to add to that conversation.
I don't think we do either.
But if you want to escape from it, Ashley,
you can buy a castle.
In Northern Ireland, they are selling one of the Game of Thrones castles. How much is this thing going for?
So it's
like $600,000 for a castle from Game of Thrones.
Oh no, Bernie, it's better than that. It's $600,000 for part of a castle.
What does that mean?
It's you get to buy like the gatehouse or like the gate part of the castle. So this castle, it's this castle. I want to say it's called Gosford Castle. It's in Northern Ireland, and it was used as the exterior of Riverrun in Game of Thrones.
That's the Tully's family's estate. If you're paying attention, their palace.
So if you want to look it up, you can check out season 3.
By the way, I did this. I went and looked up, because there was a listing for this thing, and I saw the photos of the front of it. And it's really cool. It looks really cool. But I went and looked up screenshots from Riverrun from Game of Thrones. The Riverrun exterior was based on this castle. Like, it's a small corner of the actual matte painting that then they extended or added to.
Right, like CGI in a bunch of towers behind it. Right?
Yes.
But what's interesting about
that's kind of splitting hairs. You still get to buy a Game of Thrones castle for $600,000.
You get to buy the gate part of the castle.
What does that mean? What does that mean, gatehouse?
It's specifically, it's called Bastion Gate, and it's like the gate section of the castle. Like, this castle has been like split up into like multiple areas, and what you get to buy is the gate part. So think of it as like,
I saw on the listing it was listed as semi-detached, and I had to laugh about that.
Well, so there's
semi-detached castle. That's pretty funny.
So it's probably, there's going to be some confusion because there's also a Variety article that's like, it's like 15 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms. It's not.
No, the listing said 3.
It's a 3-bedroom because maybe the whole castle has 15 bedrooms. You don't get the whole castle.
We need to get that couple from San Francisco to move in. And then it's only $400 a month.
Rent control the place.
Yeah.
But no, it's the median house price in America right now, and this is the median across the whole country, is like $320 something odd $1,000.
Is that right?
So that means
median means half the homes in America cost more than $300,000.
Yes, but then you get like Hawaii, right? The median home price in Hawaii is like $630 something thousand. So what you do is, this is really straightforward. All you do is sell up your holiday home in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah. Which just everybody listening. Hey, look, put your holiday home on the market. Beat the rush, everybody. Then buy yourself a castle in Northern Ireland.
A 3-bedroom castle gate in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, sorry. But yeah, it's so it's, a fun.
Invite us over, please.
Or just like get,
and no dumping oil on us. We're going to be watching out for that.
No boulders through the murder hole. And
boulders through the murder hole.
And
is that a euphemism?
And you are absolutely not allowed, this is in I believe the HOA rules, to have alligators in your moat.
No alligators in the moat. When did that start, by the way?
I don't know. It must. You know what? I think it must have been. Were there alligators in a moat in like?
I don't think there were ever alligators in moats, but they taught kids like in the 80s. I think that they put alligators in moats.
Well, first of all, I don't know who they are, and I don't know that anyone taught us anything. I feel like it must have been in like the animated Robin Hood or something, where there was probably like an alligator in a moat in some animated.
Dragon's Lair, the video game, had them too.
Right, and it's just then it becomes a thing, right?
There were never alligators in moats, though.
Well, it's because there aren't. I mean, how many alligators do you know of in the UK? Like,
there aren't alligators in England, but
no,
there's also no lions in England.
Them?
But lions are a big part of the iconic imagery of England.
I associate that imagery very much as like a Richard the Lionheart thing.
But where does Lionheart come from? Like, they associate it with bravery and, with lions.
Of all the British lions.
Did they just go to Africa and see lions and go, this is our thing. This is our jam.
This is our thing now? Well, I don't know. Let's look up when did unicorns go extinct in Scotland?
That's the national animal of Scotland. I don't know if people know that. National animal of Scotland is a unicorn. Wales, dragon. England, lion.
England, alligators in a moat.
What was it before that? Was it an otter or something? And they had to step up because Scotland had a unicorn and Wales had a goddamn dragon?
Yeah, ours has more teeth.
This is all you need. You just get a couple of your buddies together with some money and you go in together. You get 10 friends. It's only $60,000 in order to do this. And then you get 1.2 months a year. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing that I think probably everybody was on board with Game of Thrones and Castle and Moat up until I said friends with money. And they go like, nope, I'm out.
Also, not doing that with friends because that's how you get enemies.
All right. Who are friends with money who we have to thank today, Ashley?
Speaking of friends with money, I would like to thank Ethan Eppelman and Sky C for sponsoring this episode of Morning Somewhere at patreon.com/Morning Somewhere. Thank you both for sponsoring this episode of the show.
It's no gatehouse in a fantasy castle, but we appreciate you nonetheless. All right, well, that does it for us this Monday, July 15th, 2024. We will be back to talk to you tomorrow. We hope you will be here as well.
Bye, everybody.